Hello. Today I have with me my friend Christina Bruce. She's a sales trainer from Australia. Christina, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's very exciting to be here.
Always great to talk with you, Christina. Today we're going to talk about something we're having a conversation about. Sell the problem, not the ask. Okay. So we were discussing many sellers make the mistake. They fall into this trap of trying to sell what the buyer says they need. But say a little bit more about this. What is this trap? What happens here?
That's a good question. Um, so my observation over time, and also backed by research, is that when a seller is talking to a buyer, buyers typically use the language of wants and needs. So if you just think about this in very simplistic terms, I asked you, Vidal, what is it that you want to do with your life? What do you want to be when you grow up? Or tell me some of the things that if you could change in your life right now, what would they be? You're inclined to use the language of wants and needs. I want maybe more flexibility, or I want less stress in my life, or maybe I want a bigger house, or I want my children to be happy, or maybe I need to get fitter, or we need more money because we want to go on a holiday. So most of us communicate in the language of wants and needs. And in a buy-sell environment, that's exactly the same. And so if you're a seller and you've got an opportunity to speak to a potential buyer and you ask them questions about their business, what you'll hear is what they want to have happen in the business or what they need to have happen in the business. And I fundamentally think that can be a real pitfall for salespeople. And it's a pitfall because often what people think they want and need is not what they end up buying.
It's so interesting because you're right. That's normally how we speak to people, right? You speak to your kids, your family. Hey, what do you need? Can I get you anything? And so it's very natural. Okay. So it's very natural to fall into this. So is that why? Is that why people just fall? Like you say, it's just the language of needs.
Yeah. Yeah. It's called needs-based communication, and we're all kind of hardwired in a way to do it. And for those of us in sales, when someone tells us what they need and we have a solution for that need, it's the pitfall is that you jump to solution and you go, great, you've just told me what you need. And that happens to be what I sell. So let me tell you all about it. And I hope that's compelling enough for you to want to buy it. But for those of us that have been around the traps for a while, we know that you can spend a lot of time selling to people who never end up making a purchasing decision, not even what you're selling, but from anyone who might be selling something similar. And that's because often what we think we need, but what actually solves the problem that we have are quite different.
Do you have an example of like maybe with yourself or a client or someone where somebody went, oh yeah, I need this, and went really far down the whatever the pipeline and all this, and I was like, no, but they actually didn't buy it because they misunderstood, fell in the trap.
So one of the things we would commonly hear would be we need growth. We need the team to be more active with prospective buyers. We need more opportunities. And you say, great, I'm a sales trainer. I can train your team in how to go and prospect and get more opportunities. So I could potentially start selling you that prospecting program or that funnel program. And that would be a trap that potentially a lot of people who've got sales training programs would fall into. But if I instead took the time to say, that's not uncommon. We hear that from sales leaders all the time. Of course, every business wants more opportunities. Everyone wants their team to be focused on better opportunities and be doing better selling work. But why does your business specifically need that? Why do you think that's where your problem lies? And once you dive into that, what you will hear potentially is something quite different, quite different. It could actually be that the business is underperforming, and that's not driven by a lack of opportunities. It's driven by the wrong types of opportunities or the team focusing opportunities that are not the right size. They're too small or too complex or not an appropriate fit for our solution. So we'll often talk to clients where they'll share with us that their team are constantly asking for product modifications or bespoke solutions. And that's because they're trying to do deals with a buyer who's not the wrong kind of buyer. And a deeper problem is, have you ever clarified who your ideal client is? And if you haven't, then your team are going to go and pursue anyone and then try and force that round peg into a square hole, and you're doing all this customization. So, it might manifest as we need more opportunities, we need the team being more active out on their territories. But when you pair it right back, the problem that's driving that need is something entirely different altogether.
And we were talking earlier, I think you mentioned the term trying to uncover it using why ladders. Okay.
Yes.
What is a why ladder?
If you hear someone communicating the language of wants or needs, and at a simplistic level, let's just talk about us all as humans. Let's just say, I want to earn more money or I need to earn more money. Now, if you said to me, if you took the time to get genuinely curious and say, Christina, why? Why do you need more money? Or why do you want more money? And if we played this out and I said, I want more money because I want to be able to take my family on an overseas holiday every year. And if you then got curious and you said, why do you want to go overseas every year? What appeals to you about overseas? In my circumstance, it might be my children go to a Mandarin immersion school, right? They do 50% of their schooling in Chinese. We have no Chinese heritage, right? So I might say it's because I want to be able to take my children to China so they can have an immersive holiday and practice that language skill in that native speaking environment. And we can't afford to do that. And as soon as I say we can't afford to do, it's a problem. That's no longer the language of needs. That's actually the problem. That's the problem that underpins that need, which the need was we need more money. Why do you need more money? Because we want to go over an overseas holiday. Why do you want to go over an overseas holiday? Because I've got children who want to practice their Mandarin skills. And so why can't you just go and do that? We can't afford to. We don't have the money to do that. So that's right back there. Why don't you have the money? What's going on for you that you don't have the money? And a why question can be very direct. So the simplicity of a why ladder can be very confronting and far too direct. And we would never teach a salesperson to ask why 3, 4, 5 times because it can feel like an interrogation.
Exactly. So while it makes sense, I want to get to the root problem. If I do that with a prospect, they're going to be like, oh, no, I'm not. So how do you do that in reality?
Yeah,
How do
that's
you
a great question. Yeah. I love that question because often we talk to salespeople about what they need to do and the theory of selling, but we don't really get to the crux of how you do it, the skill. And that's what our business kind of specializes in, the skill. So the first thing is this concept of being genuinely curious. Curious is a skill in and of itself. I think some people are naturally curious. For others, it's a skill they need to learn. And curiosity is, if you're curious about something, you're more inclined to ask questions, to inquire about it. You're going to be more interested in it. And genuine curiosity kind of helps drive enthusiasm and drive performance. So if I genuinely care about your interests, then it's easier for me to get curious, which is typically underpinned by asking questions. Now, I can ask you that why question, and it can feel too direct. It can feel like an interrogation. Or instead, I can get curious and ask you what I would call a problem-based question. And so if this was your scenario, Vidal, I might say something to you like, yeah, wouldn't it be great to be able to go on an overseas holiday every year? I'd love to do that with my family too. But what problem do you have today that means you can't take your family on that overseas holiday every year? Where are you struggling financially that means you can't do that currently? And as soon as I put words like problem, challenge, concern, struggle into those questions, I turn it into what we would label a powerful problem question, which means I'm forcing you to shift from that needs and wants language to problem-based communication.
That's very subtle. Like you're saying, not just asking like why, you're saying like the way you said it was like very nice.
It's going to feel
Like
conversational, doesn't it?
yeah, very conversational.
Yeah. But the key to it is to drop in what we would call problem language, because I need to pair you back from the need and the want. I need to pair you back to the problem that's driving that need. And the way we do that is to drop in problem keywords like challenge, issue, concern, worry, struggle, lack of, absence of. Why can't you do that today? When I drop those keywords into my questioning and I'm genuinely interested in understanding why, then it forces you to step out of the need and bring you back to the problem. And when you share that problem with me, it does 2 things. It raises your own awareness of that problem, which makes it a little bit more explicit and painful for you. And as the seller, it gives me really crucial information that I can start to build on that will eventually, potentially lead me to my solution.
It's really great. Are there any other techniques that sellers can use to kind of get to the bottom of this, to the problem?
Absolutely. There's a lot, one of which is that authentic connection and that emotional connection. So I have to make the whole conversation about the buyer, not about the seller. So one of the things we always focus on when we're training and coaching salespeople is as soon as your prospect feels like this conversation is actually about you, the seller, and what you're wanting to sell, it has a huge impact on trust, credibility, and your ability to build relationships. Another key technique is you have to shift away from the use of I language. I language is, Vidal, I'd love to know why you can't take your family overseas every year. But as soon as I drop that I language in, it makes it about me. I'd love to know about it, as opposed to, Vidal, it's really common for people to want to take their family on overseas holidays every year. But why, for you in particular, is that a struggle for you at the moment? And so that's the shift to that really customer-centric, you-focused language. So that would be the other main thing that we would suggest that salespeople focus on is listen to a sales conversation that they've had. Every conversation salespeople are doing these days, virtually or on the phone, are recorded. But very few salespeople sit down and listen to those conversations back so that they can reflect on those conversations for their own development. And they should be. They should be not just reading the transcripts, they should be listening to it back, listening to the use of language that they used, and really focusing on that shift from salesperson-centric language to customer-centric language.
I love this. This is a thing that, I love studying the language, right? And sales is a lot about language, and language is so important. And this is like in sales, we deal a lot with language, but this even seems to be a really good exercise. I could just see like someone just talks about, hey, I need this, I need that, I need the other thing. And you're like, aha, okay, I'm not going to fall for that. I'm going to redirect the way you did.
Yeah.
That's actually really cool. Okay.
Well, it's a big trap for people. I don't think salespeople don't do it intentionally, this I language. It can sound very friendly and it can sound very professional, but most of the time when I read sales people's communications to clients, it's full of I language. I'd love to meet so I can talk to you about. I'd love an opportunity to share with you. I'd love to catch up so I can give you a demo. It's always, and as soon as you put the I in, it's this subtle shift from the buyer going, oh, you're genuinely interested in me, to the buyer going, you just want to sell me something.
Yes, the example there. So some phrase here lies, hey, I would like to meet you to learn more about your business or things like that. But clearly that's not right, according to what you're saying. You wouldn't say it that way. So how would you, since you want to be curious, right? How do you phrase an offer to speak with someone because you're curious without making it about you, but about them?
It's an interesting thing, right? And there's more than one component to it. So the first component is, what's the likelihood that someone doesn't know you and doesn't know your business is going to want to meet with you in the first place? I think that is extremely low in today's saturated environment. That contact of, I'd love to meet with you to learn more about your business. Most people are going to delete on that email or hang up on the phone because I don't know you and I don't know your business. You have no credibility. So we have to have two things first. And that's what we would say is branding and positioning. And there is a lot of research that supports this, is that your buyer is even further progressed on their buying journey than they ever have been before they go looking for a supplier that can potentially help them with their problems. And if you don't have branding and positioning when that supplier goes looking, then they're not going to call you, they're going to call someone else. So just for the audience, branding being, who do they think of? So when they think of suppliers, which suppliers come to mind? And do they think of you? And then positioning is, what comes to mind when they think of you? So do they think, oh, that person's been communicating with me and bringing me value and really interesting information for the last 6, 12, 18 months? Or do they think horrible things like every time they contact me, they just want to steal my time and tell me about themselves? So branding and positioning are crucial. But then if you've got that and now you want to try and get a conversation with someone, you have to use language that's going to resonate with that buyer. And so we always teach, what is your what we label it as the problem hypothesis. What is your educated guess of the problem that potential prospect might have based on your research and the limited amount of information you might know about them? And you need to go prospecting around that problem. So if you're going to send an email requesting for them to meet, you have to be tapping into that problem hypothesis. Now, it's a hypothesis. It's an educated guess. You could very well get it wrong because they don't have that problem or they're not aware that they do have it yet. And that's a part of the fun of getting positioned with a buyer, is raising their awareness that they actually do have that problem. So you have to put that problem hypothesis right up front in your communication and then use that customer-centric language. And that could be something more collaboratively, like data on this industry that you're in has suggested that this insert problem is a real problem for organizations like yours. Would you be interested to meet to explore how you and your teams or your business is affected by that problem or may be affected by that problem? And then position the day and time to meet, as opposed to the, I'd love to meet and understand whether you are being impacted by that problem, because it just makes it about you and not them.
Got it. Okay. No, that's actually very good. So I like that. I like that. All right. Are there any other pitfalls or tips or anything around this issue of selling to the problem and not the ask and avoiding needs-based?
Yeah. The biggest pitfall we would see is that salespeople hear needs because needs come out really early and then they jump to solution, right? And so if you find yourself getting to a solution really quickly in your conversation with a prospective buyer, particularly if you're in a complex selling environment, which is typically defined as there's multiple decision makers that need to get involved. If you're in a moderately complex selling environment and you find yourself going deep on solution really quickly, that's typically a red flag that you haven't done the appropriate discovery work and you don't deeply understand the customer's problem and the customer doesn't deeply understand their problem. And that's the key to this, is that the questions the salesperson should be asking should be helping the buyer go on a journey to get a better understanding of their own problem. And if you're selling against needs, the buyer doesn't go on that journey, and you can just waste a lot of time selling to someone who's actually never going to buy. So if you find yourself talking about solution really quickly, that's typically a problem. If you find yourself giving out price really early in the process, that's the other pitfall, is that you haven't done that discovery work and you're trying to sell against a need. The other thing that I would encourage everyone to do is, after you've had a conversation with a prospective buyer and you leave that meeting, can you articulate? So can you write an email back to the prospect? Can you just articulate out loud to a colleague or a manager what their problem is? Not what they need. What is their problem? Because if you leave that meeting and you're really good at saying, yeah, they told me they need this and this, then you didn't pair them back to the problem. And the test is always, after the meeting, can you articulate their problem in the language of problems the way they told you? Not the way you think it is, but the way they told you.
How do you know? Okay, this is good. How do you know you've really gotten the problem, that you've gotten to the bottom of it, right? Maybe there's multiple levels to this problem, or maybe they're not telling you what the real problem is because maybe they don't know you that well. They're not going to really tell you, or maybe they're not even really aware. So how do you know you've actually gotten to bedrock kind of problem that you can address, as opposed to maybe a superficial problem or not the right problem?
There'd be a prioritized need to resolve it, because in life, in business, we've all got a lot of problems, right? Like, you and I could sit here and make a laundry list of all the things in our life we wish were better. Some are more serious than others. Some are easier to fix than others. And it's the same in business, for any business leader, for any potential buyer. If they just wrote a laundry list of all the problems that they've got in their organization, it would be huge. But you can't set about solving every problem all at once because you don't have capacity to. And some of them you've just learned to live with. Like, the number of organizations we deal with where they've got workarounds for problems that they've forgotten that they were a problem in the first place because they put a workaround in place or they put that Band-Aid solution in place and they forgot that it was an issue and now they're just living with it. And that's the thing. Organizations live with problems all the time, because they're not painful enough to warrant hitting the top of the priority list to fix. Yeah. And if you think about this in simplistic forms, let's look at an example. If you think about a hospital ward and the number of patients in beds versus the number of nurses hospitals might have to have, that patient to staff ratio, for instance. Now, let's just say you've got nurses complaining that they're understaffed, they're overworked, they're stressed, they don't have the help that they need because they're at the coalface dealing with that every day. But if you're the level of management above them and you're meeting the mandated patient to staff ratios, it's not necessarily a problem for you because you're not feeling it every day. You're meeting the requirements and you're managing as best as you can with the staff. It's not that you're ignoring the problem, but it's not a burning platform. But let's just say something then happens to a patient. Let's just say there's an unforeseen event that shouldn't have occurred because you had stressed staff or someone was on a break and your patient to staff ratios weren't right or something went wrong because these poor stressed nursing staff were at capacity and overworked and underpaid and tired and something went wrong and there was an unforeseen or unfortunate event to a patient. Then the management level above, they have a heightened sense of urgency to fix that problem.
Yeah.
But the problem was always there. The problem was always there.
It's so interesting. There's so many levels to this, right? Because there was a problem there, but the people who had the problem actually didn't have the authority or money or budget to fix it, right?
Yes.
The people who have
yes.
money and authority, they're like, it's not that big of a problem for us. They're not personally in pain. So they're like, okay, yeah, it's a problem. And I agree with you. There are all kind of problems that we have. Some problems, sorry, a friend of mine is an entrepreneur, and there are a lot of problems that people, they won't pay any money to fix them. They're problems that, yeah, it's a problem, but I'll just pay with my time or I'll live with it. Isn't a problem they will pay to fix. So in this case, let me ask, like in that case, if you were in that scenario and I don't know, you were selling additional nursing staff or something in that example, would you be like trying to make these people aware that this is actually a bigger problem than they think, or that you could fix it, or you would be like, it's not that big a problem to them, so maybe it's going to go find someone to which it's a big problem. How do you manage that?
Absolutely. And so if you think about how you would navigate that, there'd be multiple stakeholders. That's definitely a complex selling environment, and depending on what your solution is. But questions around how are your staff handling their stress levels? Are you seeing people take extended sick or personal leave because they're overworked and stressed? Are you seeing a higher incidence on the ward because the staff are overworked and stressed? Are you finding that you have shortages and you're needing to get in labour hire services to cover the gaps because you've got staff calling in sick? Are you seeing an escalation in complaints or patient satisfaction scores going down? Are you seeing, I don't know, insurance premiums going up because of work cover claims and things like that? There'd be so many areas as a salesperson to go and prosecute, right? To raise people's awareness that this problem that you are just tolerating is actually having a heap of negative impact to the organization that you might not be acutely aware of. And that's actually my job as the salesperson, depending on what my solution is. It's my job to ask you questions, to raise your awareness, not just of the problem, your staff are stressed and overworked and tired and frustrated, but that problem has all these other negative flow-on consequences to your business that you might not be attributing to that underlying issue. But that's my job as the salesperson, is to help you make that connection, not by telling you, but by asking you questions so that you realize it yourself. And you do it with me. And as a salesperson, I'm there hearing your answers and I'm gathering all of that information. And I'm able then to articulate back to you, you have this problem. And as you've told me, that's resulting in an increase in work cover claims, an increase of staff taking extended sick leave, costs actually going up because you're having to use labour hire services. And it was the selling work that I did that helped you realize, actually, this is something that does need a solution urgently. And that's the two things That's the difference. Is you need your buyer to have what we would call a clearly defined problem, but you also need them to have a prioritized need to resolve it, because they live with problems every day. We all do. The ones that we take action to fix are the ones that we clearly and deeply understand, and therefore there's a sense of urgency to do something about them.
I think that's really great. Okay, so that's good. So now you find the problem, and if it's a problem that they're like dying to fix, okay, that's easy. But if not, then you have to raise the awareness maybe of this problem or the impact of the problem, and then actually
Correct.
they're in to solve it. That would be beneficial, because they might just think, yeah, that's just the way it is. These people are always going to be stressed, or they're always going to be unhappy, but you actually can solve it. And it's worth solving.
Correct. Yeah, correct. Problems only have negative consequences. They don't have positive consequences.
True. That's true.
So a challenge for salespeople, the skill of the conversation is, how do I get you to think about those negative flow-on consequences that are either already happening or will happen if you don't do something about it? So let me give you another example, because I interviewed a lawyer recently for the podcast that I have. And she works with people on their wills, getting them to do their legal will. Now, I have a friend and her husband have children and they don't have a will. And one of the reasons they don't have a will, but they know they need it. They know they need a will, right? So there's that language of needs. They know they need it. But one of the reasons they've never gone and taken it out is because they don't know who they would leave their children to. They don't know who they would want to have custody of their children should something happen to both of them. They actually don't want any of their immediate family to have custody of their children should something happen to them. And so one of the reasons they haven't done their legal will is because they don't know who they would give custody to. Now, what they don't understand, according to this lawyer, is that the very scenario they're trying to avoid is potentially exactly what would happen because they don't have a will. So if something happened to them today, it's quite possible tomorrow a judge would step in and give their children to immediate family members. So the exact scenario they're trying to avoid would happen.
Yeah.
So it's the perfect example of, we live with these problems all the time. Like, they know they need a will.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Need. But there is no compelling reason for them to go and get one because they aren't that worried about something tragic happening to both of them in the immediate future. But the whole point of having a will is that, thank goodness, hopefully for all of us, nothing serious happens in the immediate future, but you have it just in case. We've all spent how many thousands of dollars in our life on insurance policies that you hope you never need.
You never need. Yeah.
But you have them as a just in case. Should something, I can almost guarantee you, if something happened to someone they knew that triggered this will issue and they watched it unfold, they'd go and get a will tomorrow. It's on their list of problems they know they have, but it's not a burning platform. It's not sitting at the top. So if I'm a lawyer or a salesperson for a legal firm and I'm talking to my friends, the questions that I would be asking would be around, what concerns you about getting a will today? What challenges have you got with putting a will in place today? What's stopping you from doing it? That's all problem language. And then getting them to think about, well, what's your understanding of what would happen, negative consequence, negative flow on consequence, if something happened to you both today? What's your understanding of what would happen to your children? I need them to start thinking about the negative flow on consequences of not having a will. And if I do that, then that will help them prioritize. Actually, we have to prioritize doing this will business and getting it done.
It's such a brilliant example. Yeah. It's such an interesting one too. I love it. Christina, you've been just awesome. Okay. I always love speaking with you. Thank you so much for coming on. If people wanted to reach out to you and learn more about you or anything you do, what would be the best way?
Thank you for having me. We are very happy to talk to anyone. You can contact us on support@sellabilities.com.au. You will also find us on LinkedIn. So there, we've got a Sellabilities company page on LinkedIn. I've got obviously a page, Christina Bruce, on LinkedIn. And if you're a female small business owner, we do have the Sellability Sisterhood, which is a community on LinkedIn, but also on Instagram for female small business owners, where we help them on with their selling skills to help grow their businesses. So you can find us in a couple of places. We look forward to connecting with anyone who's interested, based in the kind of Asia Pac region. Happy to chat to anyone.
Yeah, listen, thank you so much. And I really appreciate it. And it's always a pleasure. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
All right. I'm going to hit stop recording here.